Welcome back to jQuery for Absolute Beginners. This is day 5, and today we're going to look at adding and removing elements. So let's take a look at this simple example that I created for you. We just have some list items within an unordered list, 1, 2, 3, 4. When I click on the Add List Item anchor tag, it's going to add a new list item and the most recent number. So if I add it, 6, 7, 8, 9, and alternatively, if I hit the remove list item, it's going to remove the most recent list item. So let's take a look at how we did that. I'm going to go and erase everything you see here, so we'll do this from scratch. And you know what? Let's just do it all from scratch. Okay, let's start by creating a list item, and we'll create one, and then we'll just create, we'll say we'll start with 4. And I'll change this to 2, 3, 4. And next, all we need are 2 anchor tags that will trigger the events. So we'll do an anchor tag directing nowhere, and the value will be add list item. And reversely, we'll do remove list item. Okay. Now, in order to target these, in a real-world situation, we'll need to add some kind of ID. So we'll do ID equals add, and ID equals remove. The reason I say real world is we could just use, as an array and do get the anchor tag and then get the first one, and then get the anchor tag and get the second one, and then add an event to that. But we'll do it using IDs in this case. So I have 2 script tags. I brought in my jQuery file. We're ready to get started. I'm going to say when the document's ready to be manipulated, first thing that we need to do is, if you come back here, we have tracked how many list items are currently on the page, and that way when we add this list item, it will know how many are on the page and how many to add. So what we do here is let's create a variable called I, and that's going to be equal to the length of list items that we have here. Now, using jQuery, we can use a method called size. So we can use get list item size. Now this is going to grab the total number of list items on the page. So if you're using a real project and you have many list items, you might want to give an ID, maybe something like that, and then you can do nav and then list items size. But here, this is a small page, we don't need to. Just keep that in mind as you're working on your projects. So let's see if, let's verify how many list items actually are on the page. And I'm going to use something called console.log, and I'm going to log I. So this I will contain an integer containing the total number of list items, and then using console.log we can write that out. And we're going to write that out to a plugin for Firefox called Firebug. Now if you want to get Firebug and you don't already have it, just Google Firebug, and it's a Firefox add-on. Click on the first link, and then just follow the installation, and I highly recommend it. I couldn't live without it. So I'm going to close that out, and I'm going to hit F12 to enter Firebug. And you can see here, it contains the number 4. That is what we wrote out. So if I refresh the page again, when we did console.log I contains the total number of list items, and 4 is correct. So now that we know we have the correct number, let's add our items. So let's create an event for when the add anchor tag is clicked. So we'll do get A with an ID of add. Click is going to be a function, and all we're going to do is append a new list item, and we can create elements actually the same way that we access elements. So rather than doing like we did up here with add, we can just insert our elements. So we'll do create a list item tag, and I'm going to close out the quote, and I'm going to append I, and then I'm going to do another plus and insert the end of my list item tag. So the reason I used the plus is that's saying create a list item and then plus I. See, if I did not close out the quotes, this would be considered one long string that would be output to the browser. So we need to clarify that we're actually referring to the I variable rather than just the I character. And the way we do that is by closing out the quotes, appending I, and then starting the quote, ending the list item. Okay, so we've created this element, but we haven't added it to the page just yet. And the way we can do that is using a method called append2. So append 2, and then in parentheses we enter the ID or the name of the element that we're going to be appending to. And in this case, once again, it's a simple page. I'm just going to append it to the unordered list because there's only one on the page. So when the anchor tag with an ID of add is clicked, we're going to create this new element, and then we're going to append it to the unordered list. So let's see if that worked as we thought it would. I'm going to refresh the page. And you know what? Let's enter a break tag at the bottom. Come back, refresh the page again. Okay, I'm going to click list item, and it worked. Now it hasn't added the new number because we haven't told it to just yet, but we are at least getting that functionality. If I go into Firebug once again and click inspect, we can come into the body tag, into the unordered list, and you can see it is in fact adding those new items each time, as you can see there. All right. So now we need to write the functionality that will actually add 1 to the previous list item. So let's come back. And what we really need here is at the start, I is equal to the total number of list items that are currently on the page. But when we add a list item, we don't want it equal to 4 because we already have a 4. So we want it equal to the total number of list items plus 1. And all we can do there is do plus 1. Let's come back to the page and see if that worked. Refresh the page. Now remember, we're adding this on the client side, so as soon as we refresh the page, it's going to revert back to the original number of list items. Showing how to work around that is for a tutorial far down the road. So I'm going to click list item, and you can see now it's working. But if I click it one more time, it still stays at 5. Okay, well, how can we work around that? Well, we know we're getting the correct number and storing it in the variable I, but as soon as that anchor tag is clicked, we need a way of telling it, okay, now it needs to be even 1 more than you did before. And the way we can do that is I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to do I++. And that's saying take the variable I and add 1 to it. So that's the same as saying I equals I plus 1. Okay, so I++ is simply shorthand. So let's go through this. Let's assume I equals 4. Or let's say the total number of list items on the page is 4, as it is. I will equal 4 plus 1 is 5. So let's just write it down here. I equals 5. Let's run the person hits the anchor tag, we get clicked, so we add an element, list item 5, and append it to the unordered list. Now, we're adding I++, so now I equals 6. So now, when the anchor tag is clicked again, now this will be replaced with 6 and subsequently 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's see if that did the trick for us. Refresh the page, click the list item, 5, 6, 7, 8. So good, it's working perfectly. Now let's write an event handler for when the remove anchor tag is clicked. So I'm going to do the same thing again. Get A with an ID of remove. .click is going to be a function. And we'll say, this time we're not going to be creating an element, we're going to be removing the last element. So we're going to remove the very last list item within that unordered list. And if you remember back to jQuery for Absolute Beginners Day 4, the way we can access the last element in a wrapped set is by doing get, in this case, li, and then I'm going to do colon last. And that's going to get the very last list item. And we're simply going to say remove it. We don't want it anymore. We've selected to remove the list item, so we're just going to get that last list item, in this case would be 4, and remove it. Refresh the page and see what that does for us. Add a list item, let's just add a couple. Alright, now let's remove one. 7, 6, 5, 4. Add a list item. Now look, add a list item, it jumped right back to 9 because I had been appended every single time we clicked here. So now I is 11, 12, 13, but when we remove it, we're removing the list item, but we're not changing the value of I. So when we click it again, it's going to be 14. So we need a way to tell it what I should be. So the way we can do that is by saying at the very end, I minus minus. Come back to the page, open it up, add a list item 5, 6, 7, 8, remove list items, come down to 3, let's say, add a list item, and now it's working perfectly. And the reason was I minus minus is obviously the opposite of I plus plus. We're going to take the current value of I and subtract 1. So it's I equals I minus 1. All right. So once again, let's do it. I equals, let's say the total number of list items is 6. I equals 6 plus 1 is 7. So when the anchor tag is clicked, we're going to add a list item containing the number 7 and add it to the unordered list. And then we're going to take I and add 1 to it. So now I equals 8. So let's say right after that, they click the remove button. So we're going to get the very last list item and remove it. And then now I minus minus means 8 minus minus would be 7, and it works just perfectly. So that's been your jQuery tip of the day. We kind of worked with the append to method, the way we can append elements directly to an unordered list, or you could add it to the body, or practically anything. And we looked at I++ and the size method, which is pretty much the equivalent of length. So I will see you in a day or so with jQuery for Absolute Beginners, day 6. Have a good day, everybody. See you later. Bye.